Good evening. Tonight's topic of my week 7 presentation for communication skills is the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. The specific purpose of this presentation is to persuade you, the audience, about your constitutional right to own and possess firearms. The right to bear arms involves knowing and understanding the responsibilities of owning and using and storing firearms. The right to bear arms in today's society is a pretty sensitive issue. Most of the debates surrounding the right to bear arms centers around the members being a member of a militia or a military type outfit, something similar to the National Guard. The origins of the Second Amendment concerns the invasion of foreign powers or adversaries and arming ordinary citizens to protect in case the government forces couldn't defend the country properly. The federal government should not have the power to infringe on our rights to bear arms. It's similar to the freedom of speech. Okay? A lot of people consider laws against the right to bear arms as an infringement on our privacy rights. Some people get really paranoid about Big Brother watching over their shoulder. If you're an honest person and you don't break the laws, having a firearm and being a responsible gun owner, you shouldn't have an issue. But there are those that, let's say, don't follow all the rules and they're not entirely honest. So they have some concerns. Granted, there is no reason why anybody else needs to know what guns you have, how many, and what types of ammo you have, as long as you're a responsible gun owner. And today, people are not really concerned about having to defend our country. Back when the Constitution was written and Bill of Rights and the Second Amendment was written, people were dependent on having firearms to provide for their families. They had to go out and literally hunt and kill what they ate if they were meat eaters. If they were vegetarians, of course, they just farmed. But they most oftentimes had at least a weapon for self-defense. So that was the gist of why most people had weapons back then. Now, today's society, granted, we do not have to depend so heavily on having to go out and hunt and kill our own game or food for what we're going to eat. We can just hop down to the grocery store and buy a big old fat steak. Or we can get a chicken. But we don't have to necessarily go out and track it and kill it and field strip it and then drag it home. So there are those issues. But the right to bear arms is still ours to have, and yours. In today's generation needs to be reminded that the right to bear arms comes with an understanding that there are responsibilities that come with those rights. Just saying, I want a gun, go getting a gun and a bunch of ammunition doesn't necessarily make you proficient. It's similar to having a car and never taken a driving lesson. doesn't make you a good driver. I could have a microscope, doesn't make me a scientist. I wouldn't know how to use it properly. So having a firearm, the responsibility is on you to, first of all, know how that firearm works, what it's comprised of, what its functions are. We need to know what the right ammo to use in that. You can use the wrong ammo in certain weapons, and you can actually end up hurting yourself or those around you. There are methods of cleaning your weapon. You need to know the proper ways to clean, as well as proper methods and ways of storing your weapons. The main reason that the responsibilities are so prevalent or emphasized is that with all these mass shootings going on, there's a natural knee-jerk reaction by people when one of these events happens, and then it's like, oh, well, let's take everybody's guns away because some mentally deficient person or somebody that just went off the deep end decided they would take their guns and go out and kill people. There are, sad to say, there are some people that shouldn't have guns, but it just, the laws don't allow us to go through a full-on psychological evaluation before you get a gun. They do background checks and to ensure that you're not a convicted felon or you haven't got arrested for a major crime or you're not, you don't have any warrants out for your arrest and anything that would preclude you from having a gun. That way you can be assured that, or they can be assured that you're not a danger to yourself or anybody else. So moving on from that, every occurrence of a major gun accident needs to be reviewed individually and to determine, number one, if they could be prevented or if they could not be prevented. We have people that have never been around guns and they get guns and they go out and somebody looks at them cross-eyed or calls them a bad name and they take the tough guy role and pick up a gun and go kill somebody instead of trying to work the problems out. My upbringing is that I've been around guns since I was a young boy. My stepfather took me out shooting at an early age. We would go to the local ranges in San Diego County and we would do target practice. And he bought me a .22 rifle and it was a single shot bolt action. It was really cool. It was one of those that you just set it up, put one bullet in at a time, cock it, aim, fire, unload, and you just do that each time. And he taught me the basic safety rules for handling weapons, especially at the gun range. First of all, you always handle the guns when you get them out of the house and you take them someplace. They're always unloaded in your car. They're not loaded until you're at the firing range, on the firing line, and ready to shoot, and there's nobody down range of you. Then you're supposed to be able to load your weapon and keep your muzzle pointed down range. One of the main sayings, all weapons are treated as if they're loaded at all times. Whether you know it's not loaded or not, every time you handle that weapon, it's to be treated as if it was loaded. First thing you do is check it to see if it is or is not loaded. You never know. Something can happen. A lot of accidents have happened and people have gotten hurt and killed. So you never point your weapon at something that you're not willing to destroy. And that's a harsh word, but it's true. Weapons do big damage, especially if they're in the wrong spot. You only point the muzzle of the weapon when you're not firing down, away from everybody or anything that you don't want to get hurt. The first and foremost safety on a weapon is your finger. If your finger is not on the trigger, guess what? It's not going to shoot. That's your first safety. All other weapons have another additional mechanical safety built into them. You click it and it disables the trigger. But the first one is your finger. You don't put it in with the trigger. If it's not on the trigger, you can't shoot the gun. Okay? When you do, or when you are ready to shoot, and target ranges are the best places to be trained, but you want to make sure that when you're focused on your target, that you're aware of what you're shooting and then what's beyond your target as well. Because if you were to shoot your target and the bullet goes through your target and there's a car on the other side, you're shooting a car too. But if you're in a target range where it's a totally controlled environment, then there's a big berm in the back and it catches all the stray bullets and you're not concerned. But if you were out hunting or whatever, you need to be aware of your surroundings and not only what you're shooting at, but what's beyond it. Because there are times when a bullet goes through and through and accidents happen. Let's see what else. There are questions regarding the Second Amendment and its necessity for today. Since we don't have to hunt for our food and we have a pretty good military, the United States has arguably the best military in the world. It doesn't necessitate that we should have to have weapons. Now, since we don't have to worry about outside intrusion from a foreign country, the thing we do have to worry about is, sad to say, we have people in our country that are criminals. And they don't play by the rules, and they expect that they can just come up to somebody and steal and rob and sometimes rape people. And that's not right. We need to be able to defend ourselves. So that's most of the reason that we should continue to have our right to bear arms is for self-protection, not to be a Jesse James or go out and flaunt it. It's for self-protection. Like I said, arguably our military is the strongest. If we were to match up to an outside country, say China, for example. Now, the size-wise and population-wise, China outnumbers America. It's incredible, the numbers, like I think 1 billion people. But the United States outspends China for military purposes. And I did some research, and the United States has, X number, like 7,000 nuclear warheads, and China only has like 260. So we outnumber them in that, but if they were to come and try to do a massive land invasion, they totally outnumber us. So we need to be always on the ready in case something was to happen and we had to defend our homeland. We have never had a war on our soil. We've always had to go and defend other people on their soil. So we as a nation have these privileges and these rights that a lot of countries don't have. There's Britain and some of the other European bloc countries that have their gun rights taken away from them, and they have big issues because they don't have that right to defend themselves. So there's an outfit called Pew Research that listed the reasons that American gun owners choose to have weapons. What are the reasons that people want to have weapons? And the first one is for self-protection. And the second one is for hunting. And the third one is just for sport shooting, target practice, and whatnot. So we go back to the reasons why we get a lot of flack for being gun owners and people that want to take our gun away from us, because they focus on the bad deed or the thing that happened, and they always ask the question, well, why does that person have a gun? Well, if we address the issue, who should have guns? Now, we can come right out and say, first of all, felons, convicted felons should not have weapons. And people with a known mental disorder should not have weapons. Arguably, some people that have come home from service or have a mental problem like PTSD, those people probably shouldn't have weapons unless they've gone through a psychological evaluation that would prove to them and law enforcement that they're not a danger to themselves or anybody else. You never know what goes through people's heads when they get in certain situations. So we discussed who should have and who shouldn't have. It's been documented that people with mental instability or mental issues, if they have weapons in the house, then the suicide rate by gun goes up tremendously. If they don't have a weapon or a gun in their house, then the suicide rate goes down. We said that the foremost thing that we need to emphasize, or I'm trying to emphasize to people, is that the right to bear arms comes with the responsibility for safe keeping and safe operation of handguns or firearms in general. Now, there are some basic things that can assist in knowing that your firearms are safe, no matter where they are. First of all, there are locking gun cases that you can put your weapon in, and you can close, and it has a lock on it. Literally has a lock. Combination locks, key locks. There's various kinds. There's also trigger locks that literally go in the trigger area, and they lock with a key, and you put it up, put it away, and nobody can get in, take that weapon. Oh, it's got a trigger lock on it. They're going to have to spend some time trying to remove that and probably damage the gun in the process. And then, of course, for most gun enthusiasts, they have a literal gun safe that they can put their weapons in. It's safe, it's locked. Some of them are pretty high dollar. They're actually climate controlled for their weapons, and it keeps the moisture out and keeps them in good shape. They're locked safes. Some of the other ways and methods of ensuring safety in firearms or with firearms is that the weapons, when you're not going to go shoot them, you're not at the range, you're not out in the field doing hunting, then your weapons are unloaded and they're locked up. So you have kind of a double protection there. Your weapon is locked and it's unloaded. And most oftentimes in traveling, transporting your weapons and your ammunition are in two separate locations, and your weapons are locked and your ammunition is in a separate container away from the weapons. At home, we talked about having your weapons locked or in a safe, but then your ammunition should also be in a separate locked container. That way the two are not together. When, say if somebody did break into your house and find your weapon, they didn't find it with a whole box of ammunition. Your ammunition is over here locked up, safely out of the way. So that's another way. Some people have associated firearm safety with motor vehicle safety. When we get into a car, we don't just willy-nilly hop in, turn the key, and start driving down the road. What do we do first? We put on our safety belt. What if we got in an accident? Okay? We also use our turn signals when we turn. There's just common, basic automobile safety things. There are safety things that we need to follow with firearms. Just as with our children, and another way of safety for our children, we have them wear bicycle helmets when they ride bicycles. We give them all these elbow pads and knee pads and stuff when they skate. Why wouldn't we treat our firearms the same, if not more so, about safety? That's why we stress the safety with firearms. Another thing that we pay heavy attention to in our homes especially is poisons. We don't just leave them laying out on the counter where our children can, especially babies, can walk up, grab a hold of Lysol and start drinking it. All of our poisons and cleaners and stuff are locked up or put away. So we should treat our firearms much the same way. Enough about that for a minute. Let's move on. As good Christians, we should all be living our lives according to God's law and things that would be in line with Christ's teaching. So what would the Bible say about the right to bear arms? I know you're all thinking, there was no guns back in biblical times. And you're right, there was no guns. But there were plenty of weapons. The Bible makes many references to swords and spears and having our shield. And there's no scriptural reference for weapons used for self-defense as being prohibited. So it does not say thou shalt not have a weapon, it just says thou shalt not murder. But there's like a disclaimer. In Exodus 22, verse 2, if you have your Bibles, please open them up, but I'll read it to you. It says, if a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. In other words, if it's nighttime and in the middle of the night somebody breaks into your house and you catch them red-handed and they come at you intent to hurt you or steal from you and you're in fear for you, it's okay to kill them. It says in the Bible that you will not be guilty of it. Now, if you read a little farther, it says if you catch him in the daytime and you can avoid it, then and you know who he is, then you will be in trouble. So God has specific rules for this. There's another area, in fact, I don't have my Bible with me right this moment, so I won't refer to that one. But there are multiple Bible references to using weapons and having weapons on your person. In Nehemiah, it even references the rebuilding of the wall around Jerusalem and how the workers would literally be building and constructing something with one hand and their hand on their weapon or their sword and their shield with the other while they're performing work. So it's not that the weapons were prohibited. They were meant for self-defense. We as Christians are also commanded or instructed that we are called to submit to the governmental authorities and to obey the laws of the land. And that includes gun control laws. So we should be knowledgeable of the laws that govern our right to bear arms, our reasons for using them, the methods of use. So we need to be knowledgeable and up to date on that. So I'd like to go over some basic general safe handling measures that we touched on before. That we talked about all guns, when we come in contact or we come across a gun or a weapon, we are to treat it as what? Yes, as if it was loaded at all times. And the first thing we do is, if we have to come in contact with it, we take it, we open it up, check it to make sure it is unloaded. And if it's unloaded, fine, we set it back down, or we can treat it accordingly. There again, whenever we handle weapons, we always point them in such a fashion that their muzzle is faced away from doing damage to anybody or anything. And what's our first and foremost safety? Our finger. Keep it off the trigger. You can pick up a weapon, much like a ball. You can pick it up, throw it around. As long as your finger isn't on the trigger, you're fine. And then some things that get overlooked is immediately after we go to the target range and we shoot our firearms, then we need to remind ourselves that we unload them before we store them, put them back in their locked case, or put their trigger guard on them, or put the locking cable through them and lock them up. We always make sure they're unlocked or they're locked up. Most times what we do is when we're done shooting, then we'll clean them up and then lock them up, put them safely away, and then go on home. Every home or every gun owner should have a mental safety checklist, or even inside your gun safe or whatever, have a checklist. Firearms used for safety or for hunting should be controlled in their use at all times. And there again, especially around the home, no children should have access to firearms. The only time children should have access to a firearm is at a specific location, like a gun range, under strict supervision, and being trained how to use it correctly, and that's it. In the home, all guns are unloaded, weapons are put in one place, locked and stored, ammo in another place, locked and stored. Hoarding firearms, they're again, after their use, they're to be cleaned, unlocked, or cleaned up, unloaded, and locked up at all times. The first thing we do, there again, check them to see if they're loaded. Another thing, like I said earlier, is that each firearm has its own unique characteristic. Revolvers are different than semi-automatic handguns. AR rifles are different than long-range shooting rifles or hunting rifles. So you need to understand, and you should be familiar with, the owner's manual for the weapon or the firearm that you have. So that should be one of the first and foremost things you do, is to learn about that. So more about owning firearms in today is that we need to emphasize the reason I'm trying to persuade you to know your rights and to actually entertain the thought of owning a firearm is, if you look at today, you don't have to look very far to see that there's evil in the world. You could look at the newspaper and see terrible things that are going on, as well as you can check the evening news and see all the bad things that are going on. There's rapes, there's murders, there's bank robberies, there's home break-ins. And that's just in our little community or our nation. Globally, obviously, is a lot worse. I had the opportunity to, as I said earlier, my stepfather introduced me to firearms at an early age. We trained at gun ranges. He taught me how to fire my .22. Well, as I grew older, I I didn't have my weapons. I didn't have them around the house. I wasn't really familiar with them. And so I had lost that comfortability about being around firearms until I met up with a friend of mine. And he explained the basics of gun laws and gun rules. And we went to a shooting range. He showed me proper way to shoot. And he invited me to go to a place out in Nevada called Front Sight. And it's a full-on training facility of, it's like a gun enthusiast resort. They offer all kinds of classes from 2-day to 4-day defensive handgun classes. They have some shotgun classes. They have long rifle classes. They have all kinds of firearm classes, as well as self-defense hand-to-hand classes. They have some ropes classes. It's a really good operation. But one of the things they taught us was very important. And there are some people that in today's society, they walk around, there's a color code system about our state of awareness. Some people walk around like everything's just fine and dandy and, peace, love, everything and everybody. Almost in a case of bliss and a white state. They don't notice their surroundings. There's people that walk around in a kind of a cautious state of mind or attention, knowing what's going on around them. And then those people in the condition red that think everybody's out to get them, they're almost a little paranoid. They're looking over their shoulder at all times, and they're kind of not too steady. But the front side people encourage you to be in a state of condition yellow, where you're familiar with your surroundings and you notice what's going on. So that if you're at an ATM machine, you're getting money out, and somebody comes up behind you, and they're going to be the next person in line, and the guy's kind of looking over your shoulder, kind of checking things out, making sure nobody's watching him, and he watches you put your money in your pocket, and as you go to turn, he comes and jumps you. Well, you are in condition white, you're la, 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 and then he can take advantage of you and steal your money. If you're in condition red, obviously you're already freaked out, but in condition yellow, you kind of make eye contact with the guy and let him know that you know he's there. That's the start of it. If he knows you're there, then he recognizes that, I'm not going to have such an easy chance of getting away with something. So anyhow, it's just all in the state of how you think of things. Anyways, I know I'm getting a little bit long on this presentation. Once again, I'd just like to go over the purpose of this paper. The purpose of this paper is I was hoping to convince you, the audience, to entertain the thought of your constitutional right to bear arms. And I would like to encourage you to look into it and consider the responsibilities that are involved in it, and take the opportunity to find a weapon, find a range close to you, and become familiar with it. And that way you'll be able to defend yourself, because there are going to be those times when there's not a policeman right next to you and you may have to defend yourself. And if you don't have the way or the means or the knowledge to protect yourself, you may become a victim. So there again, that was my paper. I hope you enjoyed it. God bless and have a great day.